357 Magnum versus 45 ACP, and what we have today is our Fiocchi CovertX ammunition. So this is a new ammunition by Fiocchi, and really what it is it's designed to be fired through short barrels, but also through full-size barrels. So it's a very interesting ammunition. It is not a Hornet EXTP bullet. A lot of people think that. They say that in some of my videos I've done with this ammo. But they are their own bullets, and that's what makes this ammunition particularly special. Fiocchi has created this ammo, and I'm going to try to condense what they've done really quickly to make it understandable. But basically what they did is they put deeper cuts in the lead core so that it will expand out a lot easier through a short barrel. But then they also added a much thicker than normal copper jacket on the outside of that, so that if you fire it through a longer barrel, it's not going to fragment to pieces. So they've kind of done the best of both worlds there. So our 357 Magnum's a 125 grain, and we are rated at 1425 feet per second. Our 45 ACP is a 230 grain jacket at hollow point, and we are rated at 875 feet per second. So to test the 357 Magnum, I'm going to use my 4-inch barrel Smith & Wesson 686, and to test the 45 ACP, I'm going to use my 5.3-inch Glock 41. So we're going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy we get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic test. So we're going to go into plain 10% clear ballistics, just plain gel, to see what the best potential of those cartridges are, see what kind of penetration we get, see what kind of expansion we get, because normally hollow points do expand in plain gel. Then I'm going to move on to a real world simulation, 4 layers of denim on this first 3-inch piece that represents our pectoral muscle. After that, we'll have a 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and then another 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard at the back to represent hitting back ribs. So clear ballistics is roughly a half representation of the density of flesh. So 3 inches and 16 inches is more like 1.5 inches and 8 inches in a real living target. So we're really trying to simulate a 9.5-inch target with ribs in there. So we'll do our plain clear ballistics shot, then our real world simulation, and then I will shoot at the steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy I can get with these rounds. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up we have our 45 ACP 230 grain jacket at hollow point. We're rated at 875 feet per second. I don't know what barrel length they use, but I'm gonna use a 5.3-inch Glock 41. Let's see how close I get to that 875 feet per second rate of velocity. $920, $912, $918, $910, $900. So pretty consistent velocity and above our rated velocity. So our 357 Magnum, 125 grain jacket at hollow point, rated at 1425 feet per second. Let's see what I get. $1261. $1310. $1300. $1281. $1289. $1282. So I had higher hopes for that. The 38 special and the 9mm and the 45 were all right there at the rated velocity. So this is disappointing. You know, why would they have this at 1425 and now we're not even close? So let's start our ballistics gel block and see how these compare. All right, we're going to do our best potential shot into plain clear ballistics, no denim in the way to clog a hollow point, no rib simulation to slow down its potential for its penetration. So let's see what we get with our 45 ACP. All right, let's hit that with our 357 Magnum. Let's go take a look. All right, so very interesting performance here. Very similar penetration, very similar energy dump. And that first 3 inches, there's definitely a little bit more energy dump with our 357 Magnum on top there and our 45 on the bottom. But one thing to be said, it is very difficult a lot of times to get a 45 ACP 230 grain to expand properly, and this one seems to have expanded properly. And also we have a whole ton of bullet rollback. Generally when I see bullet rollback, that means the bullet is well over 65/100ths of an inch, or maybe even 70/100ths of an inch. You know, it opens up that channel so large in that synthetic gel that it jumps backwards, but you know, it's still got that good penetration there. So a lot of damage with our 45 ACP. Our total penetration went to 14.5 inches, and then it rolled back in that channel. Our 357 Magnum, we had some good penetration. We have about 15.25 inches of penetration. I can't see through that gel how expanded that is, but it's likely expanded with the amount of cutting we see going on right there. So not bad performance. So let's put it on our denim, put in our rib simulations, and see how these compare in our real world simulation. All right, our real world simulation, 4 layers of denim, 3 inches of clear ballistics to represent hitting a pectoral muscle, a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and then another 1/4 inch MDF to represent back ribs. Let's see how our 45 ACP does. All right. Let me set this back up real quick. All right, our 357 Magnum. Let's go take a look. All right, so I had better hopes for this ammunition based on that velocity. Our bottom impact here in our rib simulation is our 45, and the top one is our 357 Magnum. And with our 45, we have almost no energy dump. That first 3 inches there, I just see a straight line, so that completely clogged with the denim and did poorly based on that. With our 357 Magnum, it still expanded out pretty well. You can see that up here, and you don't see much damage at all here with our 45 until we get to about the 9.5 inch mark. Then you can see tumbling damage. As where with our 357 Magnum, you see these striation cuts in the clear gel. That means it's expanded cutting as it goes. So our 45 ACP, we went right through that rib simulation, and we went to 23.75 inches of penetration with no expansion. So we'll pull out this rib simulation here, and you'll see here that oblong hole there definitely indicates that that was for sure tumbling through sideways. And then right here we impacted with the 357. It didn't even leave a dent. It just left a little bit of mark there from the lead, but didn't even damage it at all. So that would indicate this would go about as deep in a living target as possible without passing through. And with that, we actually got pretty good expansion. We stopped right there at 19 inches, and we have some really good expansion. So interesting ammo here. Like when I was looking at those cartridges a moment ago for the 357 Magnum, I did shake them and hold it by my ear, and I could hear sloshing powder around. The reason why I did that is because these had a very similar velocity, and they had a very similar muzzle flash to when I would load anywhere between, you know, 7 grains and maybe 7.2, 7.3 grains of tight group powder. And I would see that type of flash, and I would hear the sloshing around in the cartridge of the powder because it is a very, you know, low weight charge powder. And I think that's what they're doing here. That's kind of what I'm seeing. So I don't think it's a Magnum powder. It's a very faster powder, and that's why we're seeing all that excessive flash, and it's just not reaching true Magnum velocities, not even coming close. So definitely underperforming in that sense. However, being at around 1,300 feet per second, we still had some really good expansion, so it still performed. It's not a true Magnum, but it's not terrible. But really, it's not, from what I'm seeing, it's not a whole lot better than what, you know, somebody could hand load as really, really cheap hand loads. 45 ACP, total failure there. You know, that should have expanded. You know, you'll see gold dots, you'll see HSTs and stuff like that expand. Sometimes they do get some failures because, you know, they are moving kind of slow. But this again, I was hoping for better based on their information on how they designed that bullet and how it's made. And it doesn't look that good to me in its actual performance. So yeah, kind of disappointing here with that 45 ACP. So let's pull these out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at them. Then I'll shoot our steel, see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through plain gel, our 357 Magnum and our 45 ACP. So our 357 Magnum really had fantastic expansion overall. Petals peeled back quite a bit. Looks pretty good. Our 45 ACP, massive expansion, just totally massive. Very, very big expansion. Looks really quite fantastic. But just putting a little bit of denim in there, we clogged that and it just couldn't quite open. And our 357 Magnum going through our real world simulation did pretty well though. So there's our 45. So this is what happens a lot. It'll clog with denim, and after it does that, then it'll hit that rib simulation. Because it's not starting to open, then that rib simulation will kind of send it a little bit off balance, and then it won't expand. As where if you get rounds that will expand really big before hitting that rib simulation, you get controlled good expansion. And if you look at some of the real world studies of different cartridges, you know, stuff like this is usually pretty high. And you know, most rounds that are moving exceptionally fast, that are light bullets, anywhere between 115 and 125 grain, that are moving like well over 1200 feet per second, those are the ones that have the most stopping power. So in my testing, it's evident why, you know, because if you can expand it right away after it hits ribs, it's going to continue to have a larger bullet diameter. It's going to cut more tissue and, you know, stop a threat a lot better than something that doesn't, that's moving slower. So not the best performance I've ever seen, especially with this 45, but our 357 Magnum is acceptable. So that's a close-up look at those bullets. All right, 14 yards from the target. I'm just gonna get a front sight picture, pop these off as fast as I think I can hit the target, see if there's a big difference for shootability for me, see how these kind of feel for me. So 45 ACP, see if I can do it this. All right, that's doable. 357 Magnum. It's actually a very, very low recoil, very easy to eject brass. Yeah, it shoots a lot like my tight group hand loads, just kind of very light Magnums. Let me back it up and fire a few rounds from some distance just for fun and see how these compare. All right, 75 yards from the target, really just for fun, but you know, I like to see some differences here between different cartridges. I have a lot of fun shooting at distance, because sometimes when the cartridges are really close to performance as far as accuracy, when you stretch out that distance, sometimes you see some differences. If I didn't make a prediction here, I'm going to guess that the 45 is going to be more accurate for me because of that 230 grain bullet. You know, it has a lot of momentum. It just keeps cutting through the air pretty straight, but let's see how I can get with this. 75 yards, 45 auto. Still hits that pretty hard. All right, so relatively accurate. I did have to aim a little bit high because they were shooting just a little bit low for me. 357 Magnum. Let me fire one single action. See if that hits center mass. I don't know where that went. Huh. I have no clue where these are going. I can see dirt move, but I can't tell which side of that target they're hitting. So I'm going to aim to the right. Maybe they're going to the left. So I'm going to aim to the right and see if I make any hits. Aim off the target a little bit to the right. No, I'm going to aim off the target to the left. No, let me aim high. There we go. I think I'm out. Yeah. So for whatever reason, they were just hitting a very low point of impact for me with this, and you know, my guess was correct that the 45s were more accurate at that distance. It's one of those weird things with rounds that shoot kind of fast and they're light. Sometimes they want to hit actually low, which is interesting. Sometimes heavy rounds want to hit high because of the recoil, but these ones, all these kind of hit low from what I'm seeing. But the 357 hit a lot lower, and that has nothing to do necessarily with bullet drop. It's just the point of impact where, you know, depending on what angle they come out of my gun, like if I get a little bit of muzzle rise with the 45 right before it leaves, I'm essentially aiming high even though I don't think I am. It's worth the 357 Magnum. That's going to clear that barrel before I get any muzzle rise. So sometimes that will really affect the point of impact there. So looking at this ammo, I'm just not really impressed. I'm not seeing a whole lot going on. The only good thing I'm seeing is that we had pretty good terminal ballistics with the 357 Magnum, but at a cost of massive fireballs and just kind of weird accuracy at distance. Now, for most people, they're not going to care about that. They're going to look and say, you know, it's 14 yards. You did pretty well without trying that hard. So they're pretty much point of impact at 14 yards. And I'm going to be firing in a self-defense situation probably from 5 yards. Accuracy's fine, and the terminal ballistics were fine. So overall, they did well. But with the amount of energy we're working with, you're not going to have that legendary 357 Magnum stopping power. You're going to be closer to like 9mm, in my opinion. Not bad, but not great. If you really wanted a good 357 Magnum, you're going to want to go to a better ammo than this. And with our 45 ACP, well, it is somewhat typical for the denim in the rib simulation to prevent expansion. Based on the hype that they put out with this, that it's a short barrel load, and I was getting above the rate of velocity, and at above the rate of velocity, I can't get expansion through denim. Yeah, they shouldn't be putting that out with that type of hype if it's going to perform like any other generic 230 grain jacket of hollow point round in 45 auto. So, not great performance, but I had to give it a test. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.